Let's go off the grid.
Okay.
Let's go off the grid.
Okay.
I know that you really want to put your phone away.
Yeah.
Let's go off the grid.
Hello, and welcome to Off the Grid, a podcast about running a creative small business without relying on social media. I'm your host, Amelia Ruby, and today on the show, I am joined by a very special guest. It is a rare kind of episode where we are going to talk to a product maker, a candle maker, in fact, about how they run their business without social media. And in the process, we're going to have a really beautiful conversation about the role that social media plays in our lives, how we reclaim our attention, and how to embed your values in your entire product line. Before we get to all that, I want to remind you that I have a new book out in the world. It's called Your Attention is Sacred, Except on Social Media. And I am running a special just in time for Galentine's and Valentine's Day. I know that these are commercialized holidays and perhaps just a reason for the capitalist overlords to get people to spend money. But, my friends, I live in the Midwest where February is a sad, sad time, and I need something light and bright and lovely to break up the late winter. So I decided many years ago to embrace Valentine's Day as my own little pick-me-up and to use it as a time to show my friends a lot of love. I don't think of Valentine's Day as for romantic love, really. I truly embrace the Parks and Rec coined holiday Galentine's Day, and I like to focus on platonic relationships during this time. That's what makes me feel better in late winter, and it strengthens the bonds of my relationships with things as simple as sending Valentines. So to celebrate that with you, today through the end of the weekend, I am hosting a little buy one, get one book sale. That means that you can get 2 books for the price of 1, which means you can get 2 books for only $30 USD. And then maybe you can give one to a friend and have a little 2-person book club together through the rest of winter. Because let me tell you, if you're interested in reclaiming your attention, if you want to reevaluate your relationship with social media, maybe you heard that the new TikTok terms and conditions are really bad, and so you want to finally get off that app. Maybe you want to move the meme exchange you have with a few friends in DMs over to something more privacy focused like Signal. Maybe you're just interested in getting your screen time under 6 hours, 4 hours, 3 hours, 1 hour a day. If you want to do any of those things, it is so much easier to do with a friend. And rather than just broach that conversation cold and be like, hey, I think you spend too much time on social media. Do you want to slow that down with me? Which feels like an awkward conversation to have. Instead of that, you could propose a little book club where you buy 2 copies of my book for the price of 1 this week only, and then you give the other one to your friend. And you read this 100-page manifesto together, and that sparks some really beautiful conversations. At least I think it will. That's what I've heard from readers so far. So if you're interested, all you got to do is go to the link in the show notes or offthegrid.fun/attention and purchase a copy of the book this weekend. All book purchases this weekend will include an extra book. So you don't need to do anything special. You don't need a code. You just buy a copy of the book and I will put 2 in your order. I will also include 2 of the beautiful limited edition postcards that Chelsea Tams of Lettering Works designed for us into your package. It will come wrapped in Your Attention is Sacred stickers. It will be a lovely little Valentine's gift to you that you can then share with a friend, partner, parent, whoever you want to read this book with. So thank you so much for your excitement, your support. I hope that this week can be a time of care and love for you. I mean, I want all times to be a time of love for all of us. And with that all shared, let me tell you a little bit more about today's guest and we'll dive in. Harry Doull grew up living in a small family hotel in the French countryside. Then he worked for the World Food Program through the UN and on many YouTube projects at Google before leaving tech behind to start his candle company, Keap. Keap Candles is a Hudson Valley-based B Corp aiming to restore connection to the planet, loved ones, and personal spirit through the brilliant, soft light of candles. Harry's interests span regenerative supply chains, alternative ownership and finance, humane technology and marketing, creating permacultures, indigenous wisdom, societal and individual trauma healing, lean logic and self-management, and human scale places. Today, Harry is here to talk to us about the amazing work that he's been doing at Keap, including how this candle company has been very successful without social media. And if you like what you hear today, I want to make sure that you know that Harry is currently looking for creators to join Keap's Mindful Creators program. They want to collaborate with folks who are questioning the attention economy and using their platforms to bend and break the systems that dominate so many of us in daily life. So if you're a creator whose work is in service of cultivating more presence and connection in the world, then I think you might really love to join the Keap Mindful Creators program. I've been able to be a part of a tiny pilot of it, and I really love it. Which reminds me that as a part of that, if you want to get a Keap candle of your own, I have linked some of my favorites in the show notes, and you can use the code OFFTHEGRID for 15% off your first purchase. So as you listen to this episode, keep those candles in mind. Get yourself a beautiful one. That's another perfect companion for late winter. And then if you're interested in partnering with Keap to spread the word about their message and candles even more, check out their Mindful Creators program, which is also linked in the show notes. Thank you so much to Harry for joining me for this conversation, and to you, dear listener, for tuning in. Now, let's dive in, shall we, to this conversation about centering your values, staying off social media, and candle making with Harry of Keap Candles. Hi, Harry. Welcome to Off the Grid.
Hi, Amelia. So happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to have you here today because of the business you're running without social media, but also because you have a really interesting sort of path to that business from the sort of heart of the tech industry as we know it into small business ownership. So thanks so much for being willing to sort of share that journey.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I'm such a huge fan of your show. I was, as I mentioned, I was kind of kicking myself that I only discovered it fairly recently. I sort of couldn't believe that you were out there having all these wonderful conversations that I'd been wanting to hear or to have or to just exist in the world. And so I'm so grateful that you've been doing that work.
Yeah, well, thank you. And it's, I think that I've really leaned into practicing what I talk about on the show and letting it grow through word of mouth and through relationships. So normally people can trace sort of the path of like this person or like, how did you find the show? And it is growing, but slowly over time. So let's go back a bit in your career history. And for listeners who are just getting to know you, I want to hear how you got from working at Google to starting Keap, your candle company. Where did you begin? What exactly were you doing at Google? How did you get there? And then maybe what made you decide to leave?
Yeah, so maybe I'll start a little bit earlier, which is my parents were actually small business owners. I grew up in a small hotel in the French countryside. My parents were running a bed and breakfast, basically. And so that's the world I grew up in that informed actually so much of how I view our current business and how I view the world. There's actually probably more to say about that than about...
I know. Wait, that sounds idyllic. Was it idyllic?
It was pretty magical. I have to say I was very lucky, and I actually started my career in the humanitarian economic development world at the UN World Food Program, and that's where I thought I was going to have my career. I studied international relations, and that's where diplomacy, humanitarian work. That was kind of where I saw myself at the time. And the financial crisis hit in 2007, and it sort of put a wrench into things. I just couldn't find employment in that sector, and sort of took a lot of detours and very not non-linear path to that ended up at Google. At the time, I think just it's hard to remember that in the late 2000s and the late aughts, Google used to say their motto was "Don't be evil," and the rest of the world was like, "Yeah, this company's so cool." They're like, "Don't be evil," and that seems like so quaint now, and just like a different, totally different galaxy. I really didn't see myself working for a large company or corporation just at all. But Google was the one exception that I was considering. That kind of tells you just what a different space they occupied in the culture. And I would say then when I joined internally, it didn't feel dissonant. It still had that vibe. I was in the Paris office at the time. It was a small office, and it had a very like countercultural atmosphere inside it. The people there were like misfits in the best way, and I just felt very at home at the start. I had a variety of roles. They were all in the realm of analytics, a thing that was starting called data science, which was just a new word. So as a data person, acting as a sort of internal consultant, mainly towards salespeople, but not only. God, to me, it sounds really boring the way I just. But it was Google had just acquired YouTube, and for most of my time there, I was quite involved with YouTube. It was a bit on and off, but definitely like YouTube was a bit of a thread throughout it. And maybe I'll focus in on one point that wasn't necessarily the turning point, but was emblematic of the turning point, which was if you've seen The Social Dilemma. Tristan Harris talks about how he shared this deck out internally with Google with Google employees, and it kind of went viral within the company. And it was a deck all about that was advocating for designers and product designers to think about attention when they were designing products, and sort of predicting if we didn't, what would happen, which did happen. And that I was one of the people, and I should say my co-founder Steven and I, who both worked together at Google, we got that deck and we're like, this is amazing, and this is like so aligned with a lot of things that we've been thinking that have been kind of bothering us, but that we really haven't been able to formulate in a way that other people can understand. Because we're seeing the data, especially the ads data. We're seeing like the business, the numbers, like how things are working, and we were really feeling like the total focus of the YouTube team on watch time. That was the metric that was being touted. And internally, there was this sense that watch time was this great metric because it's so aligned, because more watch time means more ad revenue for us at Google. But you know what? If people are watching more, that means they're enjoying it. And so if they're watching it more, it's good for the users too. And we were, it was at the time when it was not a huge platform that had the same kind of space it takes today. It was maybe a bit harder to see for everyone, like how problematic that was, or what sort of the reverse of that was. But we were starting to see that there were a number of issues with that weren't necessarily in our core job description to address. But then Tristan's deck came around, and we shared that with our kind of higher ups, and we got really the same response that he described having from the CEO of Google at the time, which was, wow, so fascinating. Cool. Do you have the daily revenue metrics that we can look at to make sure like we're on track for our weekly revenue and the watch time? Like, can we see these like super short-term metrics? And we're like, yeah, okay. That didn't have any impact.
Yeah.
So yeah, we basically had started talking about other things to do together. Very randomly, Steven and I started on the side, just a fun project. And so then there were a few threads that happened together. One was we both joined Google with a sense of this is not like a normal corporation, and that's why we're kind of making an exception to go here. And then we're like, okay, it turns out like gravity did its thing. And so what is the alternative where a business can be actually, to not sound too cliche, a force for good? And that led us to go look into the worlds of cooperatives, B Corp, lots of other just concepts that we were wanting to learn more about at that time. And separately, Steve and I were massive candle nerds, and not as a business thing, just we were roommates and we burned candles all the time. We just nerded out about candles all the time. And then eventually kind of the two conversations around starting a different kind of business and our love for candles, eventually after a really long time, they kind of like, we were like, why don't we make candles this like thing that we seem to be able to talk about continuously? Why don't we put those two together? So that's how we got started in Brooklyn, and 10 years ago now.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I love hearing that you sort of grew up in a small business and had that frame of reference and then found your way into tech and corporate tech. And I very much remember when Google it felt like a place to get free on the internet. It was like you could get free things and you could find free information. And it just felt so, I want to say liberatory, but also even when I look back, I'm like, well, because it's centralized so much and it made things so much easier. And now I've come to recognize those moves as potentially problematic in how tech companies form. But I very much remember getting my first Gmail account and being like, thank God, this is so much easier to use than my Yahoo Mail or the Hotmail account I had before that, et cetera. And, I think we're moving through this big moment of nostalgia for that era of the internet right now. I'm seeing it everywhere in popular culture. I even read an article, I don't know what publication it was in, but I was reading an article over the weekend about how there are AI bots making videos that are nostalgic for the 90s internet. Our nostalgia has seeped that deep that it's infiltrated the chatbots online. So yeah, I can only imagine how it feels to have worked for Google during that era and been there through that shift. And then now to be have that be part of your story when this company means something so different than it did when you went to work there. And I remember I read the book Careless People, and the author of that talks about that with her relationship to Facebook, going there thinking it was this place where they were going to connect the world, and then being there and realizing oh, we are connecting the world to its detriment. And perhaps I should rethink this. So yeah, I'm curious if that brings up anything for you or if you feel your own internet nostalgia these days.
Oh, I definitely have internet nostalgia, and it's more I feel a sense of I see a lot of different arguments around these topics that kind of conflate the internet and social media, and to me, we can't do that. The internet has just so much promise. It comes with many risks, and we've experienced those risks, materializing in lots of ways. But it also has this promise, which we did get a few years where it felt like we were really, for the most part, enjoying those. Not saying it was perfect, and I do think technically now it's easier than ever to make those things that were conducive to real connection, to discovery, to learning, to just, if you were curious, it was just this infinite thing that was not infinite in the sense that it's dragging you down and keeping you locked in an infinite cycle, but infinite is that you can just grow and grow and grow in it. And I mean personal growth, not revenue growth. And yeah, I get excited by the idea that there's more and more people who want to revisit that and want to see if we can not go back to the past, but build something new that takes the lessons from the past and maybe does solve our kind of nostalgia for some of the things that were really cool and creative about that era.
A lot of what I do is help people get off of social media and think about how to be online less, how to put your phone down, how to close your laptop, etc. But I'm also really interested in what are the technologies that we might build that help us stay connected without the extractive algorithms, without surveillance and ad sales being the primary monetization methods. How do we do that work? And I definitely want to talk to more people who are doing that, who are trying to build tech that they think is working against these norms. So if anyone listening is doing that, please reach out to me. I would love to talk to you. But I am, exploring things like the Fediverse and Mastodon and these sorts of things. For me, it always comes back to I don't want to invest in any more platforms. I think platform technology is just much less interesting, but I love being online. And so, I love a tool like Arena where I can make connections between information without feeling like I'm being sold products 100% of the time or things like that. So I'm just kind of putting that out there in case there are folks who are building who want to come be on the podcast and talk more about how they're thinking about a different, the next era of the internet, perhaps.
I subscribe 100% to everything you said. I also want to hear from those people because, yeah, I have gotten more into finding these, you named a few of these things, the Fediverse is interesting, and I can't say I'm an expert on it, but it's essentially an open source web in a way where rather than, say, on Facebook, where your information is completely locked into the platform and they essentially own it. I mean, technically you can download your own data, but in practice they really own it. And the Fediverse is basically means that whatever, if you are using an app that's on the Fediverse, you can transfer your data very easily from one service to another. That has a lot of positives that come with it, and it also sort of weakens the possibility of any platform becoming hyper dominant. And I do think there's a lot of people in different places working on interesting solutions, and it's a very kind of atomized world. And I think that's not a bad thing, because I don't think the next generation should be necessarily like one platform that's ever. In fact, I think we've learned we probably want to avoid that. And there's a lot of interesting models. And even we'll hopefully talk about it later, but with this idea of a business coalition, a coalition of businesses working together that are off social media or that are seriously recalibrating the relationship, I think it's really interesting to think about, like, well, how do we create an online space for these people to connect? And maybe that can be an interesting case study for other similar things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been seeing more communities who are doing this locally. So I know there's like a shop in New York City, what's called Locavore or something, that's like doing this. There's a directory in Philly that's trying to build out this sort of thing. So yeah, I'm interested in all these tools as well. But before I jump all the way to that end of the conversation, I want to go back to Keap candles. I want to hear more about how you went from being data analyst at Google to a literal candle maker. And you already previewed this, that you and your co-founder had worked together and had also both loved candles and decided to start a candle company. But I'll be honest, I also have often thought of like candle companies as one of the peak like hobbyist businesses, that you like find somebody at the farmer's market who's like doing it, in their spare bedroom or their garage, and they're like selling it. It's like very small scale. So I want to hear how you thought about launching Keap, and then also how you grew it to be what it is now. So could you tell listeners a little bit more about the company and how it started and how it's grown?
So yeah, back then we were kind of in the early stages of the sort of candle boom, I would say. To be honest, it probably took us a couple years to really figure out our business model. We knew it was going to be a weird business model, basically, but we didn't know exactly in what way yet. Or I think we thought we knew, but then we ended up quite quickly sort of tweaking things. We started on Kickstarter, by the way. That kind of gave us our start. Or really, we made a series of typical rash entrepreneur decisions where we quit our jobs at Google like fully to jump into this thing. We were nobody in this world. We didn't have like a social media following around candles or anything like that. We really didn't have any credibility necessarily on that side. We had taken perfumery courses, we had done a lot of research and work and made our own candles, etc. But we also knew we wanted to make a really serious company, and we were discerning candle customers, and we tried pretty much everything there was even before we were thinking of starting a business. And so we had an idea of, we really saw so that we loved candles in general, but there wasn't like a single company that we like truly like loved. Sort of how we kind of broke it out was there was the very crafty ones that sort of overplayed the sort of like, it's craft and the guy's got a long beard and a plaid, duffel thingy, and which is cool, but just and there's lots of people like that around. It wasn't like that exciting. And the second group was the brands that pretended to be French, and me also growing up in France, I find that so boring and not like exotic in the same way that most Americans would feel. And in general, there was at the time in 2015, there just was a bit of a lack of thoughtfulness around eco-friendliness in any way and transparency and kind of the values that we wanted to have for our business. Now there's lots of candle companies that kind of hit some of these notes. But yeah, at the time we wanted to make something that was really high quality that, discerning candle lovers would enjoy, but that also did more on a social environmental side. And we were trying to figure out what that looked like. We'd had a lot of false starts because at the beginning, we actually started a nonprofit. We met at Google this nonprofit called SolarAid that was based in the UK, but that was kind of a global nonprofit. And they were doing amazing work, and we sort of shoehorned a partnership with them based on the idea that there's light and light. And then later on, as we were doing it, and we had to start this nonprofit to be able to make donations from the US. Interesting experiment. We learned a lot, but ultimately found that the sort of link was a bit too superficial, and it kind of taught us like we really need what the company is reinvesting needs to be place-based in some way. And that could be the place where our studio is and where we're employing people. It could be where our raw materials are coming from. There's a few different places we can play in, but this partnership has like no place connection. And as a result, it's not clicking really.
I love hearing this because when I look at a business and I'm like, oh, this looks so cool, I have this sort of, I don't know if it's a cognitive bias, maybe it's just like a generosity bias where I'm like, oh, well, they've just always had this figured out. They've just always done what they're doing. If it's a successful business, it's always been this way. It's always worked. And every single business owner I've talked to, that is never true. It's never been like, oh yeah, I knew what I was doing. I started that way. It worked immediately. It ran forever. It still works. Like, that's not how business works. So I'm really grateful you're surfacing, like, you started with a Kickstarter and that became one starting point. But then you went on this nonprofit journey that was like kind of eventually you realized not the direction the company needed to go. And you realized that being place-based was going to be really important for this. I'm curious, when I look at your business right now, what I see is that you sell candles. You have a really cool subscription model that seems like it would be supportive for a small business from the outside. Again, I want to hear from you how it works. And then also, you really lead with these values around not being on social media, not being available on Amazon. And now I think also working with all natural fragrances as a shift that you're making. So I'd love to hear more just about what is the business model you have now and how did you come to realize those specific business decisions and values were going to be so important?
Oh, yeah, great question. So really our business model is based on sort of three pillars. The first is that we make our own products in-house, which may sound like, okay, whatever. But actually in the luxury candle world, I believe we're the only one in the United States. And even most international brands are also outsourced to contract manufacturers. So that was the first thing. We wanted to make our own products in-house. The second pillar is that we are centered around a subscription. It's funny because we kind of thought like we would buy a subscription of our own candles because we burn candles all the time. And the idea of both not having to think about it, but having it like being really well curated and having a seasonal change and all the perks that we currently add to our subscription, that appealed to us. But we kind of thought other people wouldn't be interested. And we kind of tested it because a lot of people told us we should do it. And I'm glad we did listen to those people because it turned out that not only did people want it, but that it was really fun, to be honest, because every month we're writing little handwritten notes to our subscribers. And quite quickly, we know them by name and then we're exchanging emails with them. And the relationship we have with those customers is just so amazing. And it's just hard to have that same kind of proximity and kind of closeness with one-off customers that you don't know when you're ever going to hear from them again. And that it also just opened up when we know that we have, I don't know, 1,500 shipments going a month that are going to be kind of around the same idea. It allows us to do kind of cool things, to do cool like artwork things and different like matchbox art and lots of different things we've done over the years. We always try and kind of keep it fresh, but that wasn't really possible with sort of uncertain one-off purchasing. So in exchange, we give a really good deal to our subscribers. Our margins are low with subscribers, but we really value just that predictability, knowing that we have this core thing that allows us to make purchases in advance and things like that. And then the third element is to do very few things very well. And it's sort of an imperative with, as I mentioned, there's a few contract manufacturers that make everyone else's candles or almost everyone else's candles. And they're very good at doing what they do. They've been around for decades and they've developed, massive engineering capabilities to manage all the complexity of the different kinds of demands they get, from votive size to giant size with triple wicks and wooden wicks and blue candles and green candles with a bunch of schmutz on them. And anyway, so there's all these different like things and they're very good at managing that. I would argue they don't do any one thing super well, but they do everything at kind of an acceptable standard. And we learned that, especially with the kind of labor cost structure we have, which is much higher than those places, we needed to have a model where we're really smart with how we organize production. And doing very few things allows us to save on that complexity, which requires fewer, complex engineering systems. It still requires really smart systems, but means we can basically put a lot more into our ingredients, which leads us to the all-natural shift, which happened a few years ago. I think it's tempting to think that like there's tons of all natural candles out there. And I think when you go to the farmer's market, you may see some truly all natural candles, but they're in the luxury kind of space. There's really nothing that's truly all natural. Despite like when you search Google, it seems like there's 50 things, but basically none of them are. Or maybe there's one or two that maybe you could say are, but there's a lot of challenges with actually. There's a reason for it. There's a few reasons for it. One is, as a general rule, natural ingredients are more expensive on average. But the other thing is with candles specifically, they're real like performance challenges using only all natural ingredients. So it's easy to include a natural ingredient in your formula, but to basically forego some of the synthetics that really help with performance, whether it's scent throw or even burn or other things that make a candle, work well, it's quite hard. And basically our like real trick, we have a few tricks of how we do it, gain over the 10 years, but the main one is really just we spend so much more than anyone else on our fragrances. And that allows us to incorporate more ingredients that other companies don't have access to, or more higher volumes of those. And so we can kind of get the ingredients that solve some of those problems that are a bit out of budget for everyone else. And yeah, I think if we didn't have those pieces of our business model together, I don't think we would have made that happen. And yeah, I love what you were saying about the idea that when you see like today, a business that's now going on a podcast, it feels like they always had it figured out. And I think that's a great reminder that these things just take time, especially with physical products. Your iteration rounds take a long time, and it takes a while to really to get those feedback loops and then to make changes and make improvements. And yeah, it requires a lot of patience.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing all of that. I have approximately 3 million questions I want to ask you to follow up. But before I ask any, I just want to recap for listeners. I love these pillars you're working around. So you said in-house production of the candles, and then centering on your subscription. So you're building those relationships and you have that revenue you can count on to some degree. And then also doing a few things really, really well. And I was just looking at Seth Godin's new book on strategy. And as I was hearing you talk, I was like, oh, this is how he talks about strategy. It's not about the sort of tactics like I'm going to send 20 emails a day for 20 days. Well, 20, I'm going to send a daily email for 20 days, hopefully not 20 emails a day. That would be wild. But it's these sorts of things that you can come back to, because then as you were speaking, I was hearing like, oh, these are the principles that then guided those values-based decisions that I'm noticing in your business. Like you said, the move to all natural fragrances, as well as the commitment to not using social media and other sort of ways of doing business that are so common in product-based business that they are seen, I think, often as the only way to do business. One more nerdy business question I have for you is Keap solely e-commerce, or do you go to markets? Do you have any physical presences? Do you have a shop? Are you just online?
So we're mostly direct to consumer, but we do have a number of stockists, and we're trying to get more stockists. In our first few years, when we started, we were really, we were part of a little bit of that D2C sort of generation, even though we were and did not want to be venture backed, and so we were not fully playing in that world, but there were some things in common, I think, with how we were thinking about things. And at the time, the way we'd set up our business model and our pricing, we went to talk to some potential stores that we thought would be great, and we realized just our incentives are really not aligned in that system. And a few years later, as different changes happened with us getting off social media, we've over time kind of managed to change things around in a way that now we do feel like our incentives are aligned with stockists. So we have some great independent stores that stock us. I'd say a majority of them in the sort of New York metro area, but increasingly nationwide. We do try and get out to as many events, in-person things as we can. It's always a bit of a challenge just because we like it being like one of us from the team, so that we can really talk to all the nuance in our work. And that we find there's always a bit of a push and pull in like how many of these events we can do. But we definitely want to be doing more, getting more in-person time with customers. And yeah, we've talked for a long time about having a store. We almost did it when we moved to Kingston. We started in Brooklyn, moved to Kingston 5 years ago. And basically just as our build out was starting on our space, the pandemic hit. And so we basically nixed the plans to have like a little sort of mini storefront. And now it's kind of hard to retrofit it back in, but it's still something that we'd like to do eventually. We definitely see in-person interaction is really valuable and interesting for us. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's so interesting. I want to ask the question now that probably you came here to talk about and the listeners want to know, which is how and why did you leave social media? So as we know, with e-commerce, as you've already mentioned, like, and especially like D2C e-commerce, people are like, you got to be on social media and you got to pour all your money into ads, right? Like Google ads and Meta ads, be really active on social. That's how these companies grow. And you are truly not doing that. So I'm curious, why did you leave? And then what other choices have you made for your marketing sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely disagree with that.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Whole point of this podcast is to disagree with that advice.
So we got off around the same time as you, I think. January 2021 was when we got on social media. So when we started in 2015, actually, Steve and I were big proponents of the idea that at that time, you could really find success as an online business through great storytelling. And we were really big on the idea of becoming really good at video and doing lots of video, but we never really got that off the ground. And because we kind of forgot that like starting a whole factory and everything was kind of a big thing that would take most of our time. But we were still very big on storytelling, and we did get on Instagram initially. We never were. I know you've had some guests for whom like Instagram was everything, and they were in some cases found like great success on Instagram at a point. I'd say Instagram never really was amazing for us. I mean, we had, I forget, 14,000 followers or something like that. We were not huge, but we were spending a lot of energy on it, just pumping out more and more quote unquote content. And it didn't really feel like the cadence and the brevity of it really worked for the stories we wanted to tell. And I think on a personal level, both Steve and I are quite private people. I hear a lot of folks who struggle with social media talk about the idea of like being seen and the value of being seen. And I have so many thoughts on that. But I guess I have the privilege that I always had sort of the opposite. It was like, I don't want to be seen. I don't want anyone to know about what I'm doing. I want to be on my own. And it's funny now that I have a son who's 4, he's kind of already like that, where he's like, I don't want to go. I just want to read a book all by myself. And I think you got that from me a little bit.
Yeah, I think a lot of people feel that way, to be fair. Like a lot of listeners tell me like I didn't want to have to be an influencer just to run my business like that. I was never interested in that. And I just want to be behind the scenes working in my business. I don't want to have to be the face of it also.
Yeah, no, and to some degree, I not to say I'm like a total hermit. I love, interacting with customers, with other stakeholders of Keap, and I love relating it to people, not just being a designer. But yeah, I felt, I sort of, the amount of that I felt like excited about was definitely less than posting every day and then responding to people multiple times a day as we quickly like got into. So when we got off, we actually almost got off in 2019. We were really close. Steve and I were like just feeling fed up. Neither of us enjoyed it. And that was kind of sending us a signal like, we're never going to be good at something we don't enjoy. Let's maybe shift to other things that we've been talking about doing, but we never seem to have the bandwidth. And this thing's taking up a ton of our bandwidth. So maybe by getting rid of that, we'd free up that time and energy. And funny enough, I had a few people that I looked up to, and I still look up to, who convinced us to stay on with the argument that, you guys are kind of a voice of quote unquote reason. You're sort of this wholesome storytelling. And if voices like yours leave the platform, it just leaves all this like junk. And in hindsight, I find it funny that we were like, okay, fine. Like maybe there's something to that. But obviously when that's your message on Instagram, the algorithm is like, cool, no thanks, not interested.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, well, you should stay here to be buried by the algorithm.
So there were a number of reasons we got off. I mean, one was, so I didn't mention our purpose. Our company's purpose is to facilitate connection to the natural world, our loved ones, and our own spirit. And we just felt like a real misalignment with how by 2021 the platform had had evolved, and I think a lot of people know everything I'm talking about. I don't need to go into too much detail there.
Yeah, definitely wasn't feeling like a connective space by that point. No.
No, exactly. The second element was we didn't enjoy it. We didn't enjoy doing that. There were lots of other storytelling things we wanted to do instead, lots of other partnerships building things we wanted to do instead. And then the third main reason was it wasn't working for us. We weren't getting good results. And it wasn't just that, seeing like where new customers were coming from versus the effort and money that was going in. But it was also that the customers that were coming, they were our shittiest customers. And they were, they had the lowest, what we call lifetime value, how much they spend over their course of being a customer. They had the highest incidence of like returns of like being like, oh, actually, you know what? I changed my mind. I don't want the wood cabin candle. I want this other candle. And not to say like if someone has that, it's cool.
Yeah, but you notice a trend.
And also the tone is different. Like the tone is a bit more transactional. And I would say just in general, it felt like there's like a group of customers we have that are kind of unpleasant and transactional. And we have all our other customers who are amazing to work, like where we feel like it's not like a customer business relationship. It's something different that's beautiful and enriching. And that makes us just want to come into work every day and like sing and make candles. And we're like, could we just get rid of that little part that's really like not fun? And I think the way we sort of rationalized it kind of makes sense when I think about my behavior when I was on Instagram was as a user was I'm lying down at 2 a.m. and I'm like doom scrolling and I'm feeling like, and there's all this like bad news and all this like candy attention stuff. And I'm feeling kind of crappy. And so then when I buy a candle, I'm like, I'm finding a company in the midst of feeling kind of yucky. And yeah, it's like the analogy I use is when we thought about kind of where do we find customers is like a first date. How does your first date kick off? And when people find us in a really nice independent store that's really values aligned, or when people find us in a restaurant bathroom that they really enjoy, or when they find us at their friend's house, those are really experiences that are memorable and enjoyable that they kind of associate with something connective. And when they find us on Instagram, though, they kind of, it's a totally different way of relating to us.
Yeah, I love this metaphor, though, because it does feel like if customers find you in those places you mentioned, it's like you've gone on a beautiful first date together. But if they find you on social media, it's like going to like the worst speed dating event of your life and then getting a candle at the end. Like, and when that's the case, you even associate that candle with all of the olfactory senses with that negative experience. And that's like truly the last thing a candle company would want is to have your scents and your candles associated with something like that. I really appreciate you bringing this up, though, because it's something that no one's ever quite said on the podcast before that I think is so important to surface, which is that it's really important as business owners to care about our customers and the quality of their lives, and also just to notice that there are different qualities of customers. I mean, I think every business owner listening to this can probably, if you've been in business for a few years, you've definitely had clients where you're like, that was not the right fit. You've had customers where like, they did not get what we were doing. And why would you want to share your business somewhere where there are just a lot more of those people? As opposed to, well, I know why, because it's presented as like the easy and the only option. But there are these other pathways that we can build to connect with people who get it. And there are ways we can learn to communicate about what we do. So that's much more present and resonant for them. So I want to hear then about your email list and your newsletter and your email marketing, because I've been on many candle companies' lists over the years, and none of them sound like yours. And so I'm so curious, like, when did you start building your email list? Who runs it now? How did you decide on the tone? And like, I guess, how does it impact your business? Like anything you want to share?
Yeah, so we had the newsletter pretty much from the beginning. I don't remember exactly when, but definitely it was early on. And it's definitely our main channel of storytelling. It's kind of where everything starts. And yeah, we have something like 11,000 people on it, but we have a 70-ish% open rate. So in my mind, we have about 7,000 people reading the emails.
I just want to say that's phenomenal. Like the industry stats that I see are like, if you have that many subscribers, you should have an under 50% open rate. So I just want to like applaud you from the nerdy business side of things.
There's a lot of things I want to improve about it. It's always far from perfect, but kind of coming back to what we were just talking about before about finding your customers, the right customers for you does, I think at the bottom of it, we've had good mentoring to really ask ourselves the question, like, who is our customer? And not just, what's their gender and age and geography, but what are their, I guess you could call them psychographics. Like, what are their needs? What are their aspirations? What are their daily rituals? What's their life really like, essentially? And when you kind of turn that switch to have that sense of curiosity of discovering that, and in our case, we have a few ways to do that. One is in-person events, obviously, are a great way to just have conversations with people. But then we have this very extensive survey we do every year in the summer that is extremely long. And somehow we always get a few hundred people who answer it. And it provides just a level of richness and depth and insight that is really awesome. And then we do, not systematically, but usually about once a year, I have a sort of moment like, there's this thing that I'm not totally sure how our customers are going to react. I want to talk to 20 customers on the phone and who might have an interesting opinion on this and kind of just get a pulse. And usually after about 10 of those conversations, I'm realizing the 10 other people are going to say exactly what they're going to say at this point. But those are really insightful where I can, and people love to share their opinion usually and love to be involved in ultimately the direction of our company and contributing to that. So I think how we talk in our newsletter is highly influenced by us being curious about our customers and caring about them, not to the extent that we forego our own sense of direction and purpose, because our customers, appreciate us giving that leadership and that sense of we're giving a direction and something exciting to join, but still being in tune to what they're experiencing and trying to find ways that we can, better meet their needs on our journey. But yeah, so on the newsletter front, that's really the secret, really. And we try and we try and find the balance of making it meaningful and purposeful while keeping it entertaining. I think in general, most people would think our newsletter is probably a bit long. It has a lot of text. I think increasingly so as our attentional capacities are, even if you're not on social media, I feel like we're all kind of shrinking in our attentional capacities. But yeah, I think we also try and involve our customers in the conversations in different ways. And I think in a bit of a Patreon style, I think everyone loves, when you get a shout out on a newsletter that you care about, it always feels good. And so we try and create opportunities for that sort of thing to happen.
Yeah, I love that you shout out your new candle subscribers. It's so sweet to see. And it has I've been oh, I want my name there. It really works. I love it.
Yeah, it's nice because it also forces me to read the names of in my own head. And then I'm oh, Nikhil, yeah, you joined 2 months ago. Cool. It's fun. And I think that if it's not fun, it's a problem. If we're not having fun doing it, we really need to rethink it. So I think periodically, I think there's always a process of it's exciting, it's fresh. And then after a while, it starts to get stale. You need to renew your sort of creativity well a little bit. And then you change things up slightly. And then it feels exciting well. And you kind of have to go through these cycles periodically.
Yeah, 100%. What I really heard you say was sort of these 3 pieces I'm always talking about on the podcast is you have to have that creative sovereignty in your business. You are leading the business and you know what you want to do with the candles and what you see. And you have to have a sort of curiosity and responsiveness for your customers or your clients. You really have to care about them and touch in somehow with what they want and need and help that inform your creative vision, although not take it over. You can't do a survey like that and then just do every single thing people suggest you do for them. That will wreck a business so fast. And then also you have to build in those experiments. You have to try new things just to keep enjoying it. Because as creative people, I have found that we just get bored. And there's 2 types of boredom. There's the generative boredom of a day with nothing on your calendar where you just get to wander and wonder and enjoy. That's beautiful boredom. But then there's the boredom of doing the same thing over and over and over again because you think you should or you have to, that just really drains the sort of creative well so fast. So I'm just hearing you're really hitting all of those aspects, the creative sovereignty, the radical responsiveness, and the curiosity and experimentation that's letting this continue to evolve and succeed sustainably over time.
Wow, that was a real
Well, Harry, as we sort of begin to wrap up, the other thing that you're doing that I'm really excited about and want to be more of a part of is starting to build, as you mentioned, a coalition of businesses who are off of social media and working in different ways. So I'm curious, like, what is your dream for that? What are the things you've done so far? And how can people like tap in, I guess, with you, with us, if they want to take part in that vision?
Yes, the thing that would like to see happen is seeing as many businesses as possible who have already gone off social media or who have seriously recalibrated in a significant way. And as a sort of separate group, companies that are interested, that are more than interested, that are committed to doing the same. And having them in a space, could be offline, online, I think ideally both, and where we can share tips and resources and best practices. That seems like the sort of obvious, easy thing. But then I think there's interesting ways we can help each other, whether that's kind of co-marketing or, like, for example, with other product businesses, we could kind of have a directory of products that are off social media, or like a certification, however you want to call it, something that like tells customers like these companies are all on the same journey. And if this is a topic you care about, here's where you can find more like it. And lots of other little offshoots that I would hope happen kind of organically from the different types of businesses that might be involved in that. Because I think a service business would have a very different set of needs and wants. And I think where I get really excited, where it becomes really an exciting dream, is that if we had even 100 of these businesses, which I think there already are easily 100 businesses that have gone off social media in the US, that if a new technology emerged for social networking that we thought, oh, this is cool, and coming back to earlier part of the conversation, new exciting technologies that take a different path than algorithmic attention mining platforms, then we as businesses could also put our weight behind that. As if one of us hops on to whatever, I'll just pick a random example, Mastodon doesn't really do that much, but if 100 of us go on there and we already have existing links between each other, it can really create interesting momentum. And I think the more this coalition grows, the more that power grows, and maybe even lobbying. Who knows? That's not like my thing, but maybe someone could join in for whom that's their thing. Anyway, I think we could as a group really move the needle in ways that individually, none of us really have the capacity to do. And I think it would be fun too. Yeah, I think it would be fun.
Yeah. No, I mean, I completely agree. And I also find this really exciting. And my hope is that we can be gathering more businesses who are doing this work and sort of create our own network effects and do that in places that are not then immediately being sucked up the venture capital pipeline, because that, I'll put all my cards on the table, is essentially how I feel about Substack. It's like a place a lot of people took their email lists and their sort of audience power and network effect, and now it's really servicing venture capital firms and other people making a lot of money. Like, I would really love to see this coalition build around businesses who are stepping away from social media with like shared values around what we think matters in our businesses and why they matter to us so much. And that's why I'm just so happy to have connected with you and to have had this conversation, not just about your business being off social media, but about, the strategy and the values that guide that on every level, and to share the story of what you're doing and like that it is working. Because I think a lot of the times when I talk to people, often they're like solopreneurs who are like just doing the grind on their own, or there's just a lot of fear and unsurety if this can actually work. And so I really enjoyed like teasing out all of these things in this conversation around how we're building in the values, staying off social, and finding success in the process.
So cool. Yeah, you mentioned Substack. I want to plug in, I should caveat, I'm not a user or a super expert, but I've been impressed by what I've been seeing from ghost.org, which is a nonprofit, foundation-owned, open source version of Substack, basically. And they take way less of your money as a creator than Substack does, and they're doing really well. So if anyone's on Substack and having similar feelings, I highly recommend checking ghost.org out.
Yeah. And you can build your whole website there. And they have also, I think, made these pretty radical shifts recently around sort of connecting into the Fediverse and going all in on this different vision of the internet. So I also am very excited by what they're doing and a little intimidated by the way it invites me to really rethink how I envision how information moves around the internet. I think that's really what we're being called to do. And I think that work is fundamental and very necessary for the type of internet we're talking about wanting to build our businesses on here. So I think a ghost migration is in my future, even though it feels like a very big project as someone who's been on Squarespace forever and does still have an active Substack offering. So
I would definitely listen to that episode when you do it, kind of explaining it. I'd be super curious. And if I may, I just wanted to, on my end, put one mention just for folks who are on this journey, whether you're a business owner or a creator, and you're thinking about getting off or you're already off and you want to connect already. We don't have a formal structure for this coalition yet, but I'd love to hear from everyone. I love connecting with other folks who are on this journey. And yeah, we are going to start. There's going to start to be some things happening. We just had you had asked me what have we done? And I didn't answer that at all. But we just last week had a panel in New York City around the topic of how to get your business off social media. And we just had such an amazing energy. And now it feels like we have this starting group of people in New York, but it's not a New York specific topic. So love to connect with people across the country.
yeah, well, listeners, go buy yourself a candle, go get on the Keap newsletter list and check out everything that they're up to. And Harry, is there anything else you want to say or share with Off the Grid listeners today?
Yeah, I'll also include a Off the Grid listeners discount code for the show notes. And thank you everyone for listening. Thank you for being a part of this. And yeah, thank you, Amelia, for hosting all of these amazing conversations. And you've been such an inspiration, I think, for me and for many others. And I'm just so honored to share this space with you.
Well, thank you. The feeling is mutual. And listeners, if you're still here, check the feed again on Friday because I have a bonus for you that will be coming here very, very soon. So until next time, we will see you off the grid.
I kinda hate social media, feeds on my brain like a bacteria. If you read my Wikipedia, it'll say I kinda hate social media. Post a picture of myself, sacrifice my mental health, use your product time to sell. I would rather go to hell. Do you like this? Leave a comment. Can you share this? Will you wear this? Do you like this? Leave a comment. Can you share this? Will you wear this? Okay.
That was an abridged version of Social Media by Surfer Boy and Rectangle. To hear the entire song, find Surfer Boy on Spotify or head to the link in the show notes. Thanks so much to them for sharing the song with us, as well as to Melissa Caitlin Carter, who sings our theme song that you hear at the start of every show. I'm your host, Amelia Fruby, and if you enjoyed this episode, I hope you will download the free Leaving Social Media Toolkit at offthegrid.fun/toolkit. Until next time, I will see you off the grid.